Okay, hello, everyone. We're here today with a special guest from on Echo, Frank Carver. He is the White House correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine, as well as a contributor to Forbes Digital Assets. Frank, we always ask our guests that come on first and foremost, how did you get into crypto?
So I had somebody describe to me what Bitcoin was. It was the first week of January 2018. I actually still say I had the week before this New Year's Eve 2017. Living in New York is expensive. I was working as an adjunct professor at the time at a few different universities, and I took a year off from drinking. And I was at a friend's birthday party at a bar, and I still sort of attribute the fact that I wasn't drinking that night to the fact that I didn't just dismiss what he had to say about magic internet money and actually listen to him. And I was immediately down the rabbit hole. So before teaching, I was in the music business, and I worked with a lot of DIY. So like the New York hip hop and hardcore scenes, like in New York, bands like or acts like Immortal Technique, Dead Prez, hip hop artists like that, and then the hardcore scene. So I guess most well known maybe like CBGB's, clubs like that that existed many eons ago. I'm dating myself by saying this stuff. But what I knew about that culture was that it was, as I said, like very DIY, very do it yourself. And it was sort of, in that culture, nobody was waiting for a record label to put out their record or someone to put on their show. They were doing it themselves and they were doing it. I mean, it was very sort of driven by love. And so when I understood this sort of culture around open source development, people just creating, working on protocols or Bitcoin or layer twos on it, all this stuff, I was just immediately down the rabbit hole. There was, people have their Bitcoin story and they say they thought it was a scam at first. I was probably too believing or trustworthy
Right.
of everything I heard from the beginning. If anything, I was just utterly fascinated with the technology. And part of the reason I lived in Venezuela under Chavez, so I've seen hyperinflation in real time. Before that, I was working in rural Africa in Ghana. And so I've
Mm.
seen what it means for people to be cut off from traditional financial systems in both countries, in Ghana, in rural Ghana, and in inner city Venezuela. And I was just like, yeah, once I learned what this was, I was like, okay, it solves those issues. And I was just utterly fascinated from day one. So that was about 7.5 years ago now.
Got it, got it. Can you go into a little bit more about your work in those two countries and what you're
Yep.
doing there?
Yeah, I'm not a finance guy. I'm not a tech bro. I'm none of the above. I taught immigrants for 12 years. I taught at a few different colleges here in New York. But I was an ESL teacher in New York City public schools. I used to teach in East Harlem, and in Venezuela. That's actually where I started teaching. I taught in what's called a barrio there. So barrios are like shanty towns or favelas, they call them in Brazil, but it's like the tin shacks. So I taught and lived in that community. When I tell most Venezuelans that, they think I'm just a complete insane person. It was kind of a crazy place to live, and I say that, my neighbors were being murdered, and it was a lot of wild stuff to see up close. It was really sad to see, but I did learn a lot about the power of community living in a place like that. In Ghana, this is probably the craziest, weirdest thing ever, but I was in the music industry and I left it and I was waiting tables and I ended up becoming the waiter for the person who created mortgage-backed securities, which is what collapsed the global economy in 2008 or 9. I was just serving him plates of pasta at an Italian restaurant right outside of Queens. And we got to know each other. And there was a Ghanaian priest at the parish that he would go to. I guess it was a Catholic church. And the priest was talking about the village he's from and how they had this trade school that needed to be updated. And I had gotten to know this guy. His name is Lou Ranieri. If you've seen the movie The Big Short, he's one of the characters in the
Mhm.
beginning of The Big Short.
Okay.
Yeah, so I became his personal waiter. He's kind of a very introverted guy, and he would just get comfortable around certain people. And so one day he referenced a book. He's a very brilliant mind aside from finance and stuff. And what he created, it wasn't so much that what he created is what caused the collapse. The abuse of what he created is what caused the collapse, not to necessarily defend the product or whatever, but to give a little context. But he asked me to go to rural Ghana and to develop this trade school because I had done some work in Brazil and in Mexico around education, children's education in particular, and the school did a lot of work. I mean, everything. I think it was late primary, junior high, and high school, and it did a lot of cool work. So I ended up. I had to learn a lot. I had to learn how to do some electrical engineering. I had to bring a satellite dish with me to bring internet to this very rural region of Ghana to help sort of modernize the trade school. And yeah, I just found myself a few weeks later in rural Africa, working with the local community to help bring internet, teach them how that worked. This was 2008 or nine, so it wasn't like some of this communication technology hadn't been there yet. But I'm working for the guy who created the product that caused a global financial collapse. And from there, I go and live through hyperinflation. So I was sort of prepped for what Bitcoin is as an alternative or sort of a life raft based on the work I was doing. And at that time, I had no idea what Bitcoin was. I mean, zero, zero, zero idea what it was. It was years later until I learned what it was and why I thought it was valuable.
Right. And I think for us, that's why a huge deal of why we love this space because it is all about community. And for us, we choose uh the educational portion part of it because that's important, right?
Yeah.
There's so much to learn in the space and so forth. But also pivoting now to New York.
Oof.
We've exactly
Yeah.
it just boggles my mind that literally New Yorkers are being kept from building wealth. Because
Totally.
if you go on Coinbase, I live here in the DC area. Rashona, Kim, and Dylan live in New York
Okay.
specifically, right? When we go, my Coinbase, totally different from their Coinbase.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
see that New York should do, could do, New Yorkers? Because it's literally people being kept from building wealth.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of nuance that I have to sort of give a disclaimer when I talk about crypto more generally. I do appreciate the broader technology. Personally, I
Mhm.
only invest in Bitcoin, and not that I don't think there's value otherwise. And I
Correct,
actually don't.
correct.
I'm not a maximalist or anything, but I just say that mostly because I think Bitcoin is money, whereas some of the other assets are like more akin to like stake in maybe a startup or something like that. And
Mhm.
so just for that context, but I know what you're saying. And the reason we have this issue in New York is something called the bit license. It's not necessarily the name of it. I think it's called like the virtual asset service provider license, which I think was created, it was 2014 or 15 by the superintendent. His name was Ben Lawsky.
Alaska. Yes.
What's kind of bananas about this thing is that he literally created this rule which gave a moat to certain companies that had it. And then he went into private practice to start helping companies get the license, like one of the biggest scammers of all time. I was just with Mayor Adams at Gracie Mansion 2 weeks ago. They had the first ever New York Crypto Summit.
Nice.
And the one thing that we all agreed on, me being more primarily Bitcoin focused and then other people working on all sorts of crypto projects, was like, you have to get rid of the bit license. Like, you have to allow New York to be a hub, not just for development of businesses, but New Yorkers should be free to do with their money what they want to do. And it stops people from using, I've had this conversation with Assemblyman Clyde Vannell, who I think is actually pretty one, I'm always happy to see Democrats involved in Bitcoin and crypto. Like it always makes me happy. I met with him. I covered the DNC for Bitcoin Magazine, and we met there. And they really believe this, and it frightens me, but they truly, truly believe that they are doing New Yorkers a service, not a disservice, by keeping them safe from these investments. And his rationale, which I'll give him some credit on, is, well, look, we saved you from FTX, we saved you from BlockFi, and I can that's fine. You can make that argument, but it doesn't, because maybe you stopped us from using a certain platform because you wouldn't let that platform operate here, doesn't mean you have also blocked people from other opportunities. That the two are not exclusive. Because maybe this happened doesn't mean this other thing didn't happen. And there's a lot of amazing products out there. Plus, like you said, then there's also coin selection, what you can invest in and what you can't invest in when you're looking at your Coinbase account. I'm a big proponent of what you guys are doing in terms of educating people to make decisions.
Mhm.
And allowing them to make those decisions. Personally, one of the reasons that I only talk about Bitcoin, it's obviously the safest bet in this space, and it's a different sort of animal. But I'm completely agnostic. Like, people, I believe, should be able to make up their own mind, and I even say that even if maybe you're just very good at speculating, maybe you're very good at trading, you should have the right to do that if you're good at doing that. Like,
Right.
there's no moral judgment there on my part. And I think that the fact that New York feels that they have to protect people from this, it's very paternalistic. But what bothers me more, and I've written extensively about this, if you Google my name in New York, you'll see plenty of me writing pieces about the damage that has been done. But if I had to guess, it was the system protecting the old financial
Yes.
guard, the
Yes.
system
Exactly.
protecting Wall Street.
Correct.
And that deeply saddens me because so even when I first got into Bitcoin, I actually went back. I was teaching at a few different universities, one of which was Pace, and they allowed me to do some free MBA classes. I was never, I still don't have much interest in traditional finance and the finance bros and all that. It just doesn't do anything for me. No, it's not. I'm half joking when I say the finance bros, but it just doesn't do anything for me. I personally, I love Bitcoin as an inclusive technology, a technology that anyone with an internet connection can utilize, and that it's not in a walled garden, and the broader crypto space as well. The fact that this is just something that anyone can access versus having to set up a Fidelity account or a Charles Schwab account or any of this stuff that goes on behind sort of the walled garden. Um, I don't it's sad. It's like I used to fall asleep in these MBA courses I took. I was just bored to death. It just did nothing for me. It
Totally.
just,
Totally.
yeah, it just didn't have the spirit of like this industry. And I just think that they're protecting the old guard. Now that the old guard has gotten in, they've issued ETFs, Bitcoin
Of
ETF,
course,
Ethereum. Yeah. They've gotten
the
their
same
team.
game, the same
Same
game.
game. Yeah. And the fact that people won't acknowledge this kind of saddens me. I also wish the messaging is also what bothers me. So in a lot of ways, I respect the Southern District in New York. I respect Letitia James,
Yes,
but again, it's like this thing of like it's constantly saying crypto assets are dangerous,
Yes.
ignoring the fact that so just taking Bitcoin in particular, the best performing asset of the last 10 years,
100%.
right?
With the
It's like so
ETF, you know.
ETFs,
so it's like why are you
futures.
yeah, and it saddens me because I've had to become politically independent. I don't I vote across the
Agreed.
aisle.
Agreed.
And part of like I think Gillibrand is actually great. I think she's done some really good stuff. I think Richie Torres is great. But they just have very sensible takes on things. But it saddens me because I've gotten this deep feeling of like so I was in before doing this, I taught immigrants for 12 years. I was at Hunter doing my master's in clinical social work. I was counseling active drug users in Brownsville, and I was counseling Holocaust survivors. So, like,
Wow.
yeah, it's like my work is with people, and but
Yes.
the idea that it frightens me that I get this vibe. It's almost like Democrats really don't want people to take control of their own lives. They want control over them. And that bothers me because it's very paternalistic. It's saying to people, we don't believe you have the ability to take control
You know
over
what's
your own
good for
Exactly.
lives.
you
Yeah,
more
and
than
I've
for yourself.
yeah, and it saddens me because I teach. I mentioned this to you guys when I spoke with you. I teach in a program called Bitcoin Dada. Dada means sister in Swahili.
Certainly.
Yeah, and so Marcel Lorraine, I'm going to give her a shout out here. She's just like sorry, I don't want to use bad language. She's a hero on the African continent. Yeah,
We look
She-
forward to meeting her.
yeah.
Yeah, we do. We do.
If you can ever have her on or some of her people, one of people
Con
from her group, I
Connect
can connect
us.
you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you. All right.
And there's another woman from her company that just started a product there. I was in Africa. I was in Kenya in December for the Africa Bitcoin conference, and she started an app called one of the graduates from Bitcoin Data started an app called Tando, where you can on the back end you can pay with Bitcoin wherever you want, and then the bill gets settled on their mobile money network. So it's a bridge between just really cool technology.
Yeah.
I love this. This warms my
Yeah,
heart.
totally. Same here. And with those women, so women in this part of the world are not allowed to inherit any property. Only men can inherit property. So what we teach them is essentially how to own Bitcoin so that they have a stake in something.
Mm.
And I have a bias here. My mother has 8 sisters, and I have 3 younger sisters. So like,
Oh,
yeah,
so okay, makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah. So
Okay.
there's a sort of like
Yeah.
when we talk about financial inclusion, it's a personal thing to me on that level. But also I think generally speaking, please, the men on this call, don't take offense to this. I think women are, I don't know how to put it. I grew up with a mom that was very good at managing money, so I'll say my bias again there. But I think women are very good at managing money, and I learned a lot about this. So in East Africa, they have something called chama, which is when they sort of, as a community, they put a pot of money together, and it becomes sort of like the insurance policy for the community.
Mm.
And so there's now apps called like BitChama where they actually save in Bitcoin for the Chama group. So instead of a depreciating currency like the Kenyan shilling, they're saving in
Of
an
course.
appreciating
Fit
currency.
currency. Makes sense.
That's good.
So if you Google, the stuff I do for Forbes is just documenting this sort of stuff. I was also just recently in the biggest, I hate the word, it's an informal settlement. The other word for it is slum, but the largest region like this in Africa, it's in Kenya, and they have an entire economy functioning just on Bitcoin now because there's a lot of refugees that come from other African countries that are settled here and they can't get a national ID, and without a national ID, you can't take place in the digital economy. But so I see all this stuff happening, and it's one of the reasons that I do what I do now politically is because, unfortunately, and I stress the unfortunately part of this statement, what I've learned a lot from dealing with people abroad is that whatever policy we come up with here in the States end up getting copied and pasted. And I don't want to see the Kenyan government or some other government start copying and pasting really bad policy from the US. So I look at what I do now as trying to influence things both at the New York level and the federal level to say, like, I recently met with the former chair of the CFTC, and I asked him directly, I was like, you understand that what we do in the United States is going to have an impact on people globally.
Correct.
Obviously, it's going to have an impact here. And he's like, yes, we do consider that or whatever. But I think it's helpful for them to have a reminder, someone in their ear saying, hey, like, we're watching and there's people around the world watching, and we're hoping that you do the right thing. But I think the bigger thing in the United States is that, especially New York, and I could see by the way you're all nodding that we all feel the same pain when it comes to New York. It's
Yes, we do.
We do.
It's this deep feeling of like, you want to, like, whenever I walk down the street and I see that sometimes there's like those flags on the light pole that say like the financial capital of the world. I'm like, where do you get where do you get the audacity
How's
to
that
say
possible?
that? Yeah, exactly.
What I like to interject, and I love the
Please.
passion, I love what you're doing, is how do we also, like you said, that people are watching us and adapting our systems, but at the same time, I'm listening to, and how can we adapt international systems that are working, right? Because what you're doing is something that BK Crypto has thought about for years, but people never see it here. And why? Why can't we grasp the idea of what you're doing here?
I'm gonna just say it straight out. People are too comfortable, despite the fact, I know there's hardship and I'm not diminishing anyone else, but there's relative comfort. So if you're, for example, I said something to, when I was interviewing Marcella Rain for the first time, the woman in Kenya, I said, why are you so passionate about separating money from state? I said, what about maybe like the women, I don't know, single mothers who get benefits from the government there? And she just started laughing. And I'm like, why are you laughing? She's like, you think those benefits exist here? And I'm like, oh, okay. So I was like, all right, I got it.
So it's really a matter of survival over there.
That's it.
Exactly.
And I was coming at that with my own sort of New Yorker, sort of social worker in training hat, on. But what we can, I think what makes it hard, there's a few things that make this difficult. New York City public, I have friends that have tried to teach this in New York City public schools. They get laughed out of it, and they also can't because of capital gains taxes. So if you start teaching kids how to use this technology and they're using it, potentially spending it on something, they're technically incurring a capital gains tax. So there's this whole like, are we putting someone in a worse off situation because they're actually using the tech, even though the tech could be beneficial? They won't let them do it. They'll just, I mean, most people in my life, I was a college lecturer before doing this, they think I've just completely lost my mind and I'm just a crazy person. So there's sort of beyond education
disconnect.
Yeah, there's a disconnect, and the Overton window on this topic has not shifted far enough. It's starting to shift. Like people are starting to be like, okay, this is sort of a normal thing. But I think the other thing in New York too, and this gets really difficult. I mean, I'm traditionally a Democrat, like lifelong sort of liberal person, but because now Bitcoin and crypto, all this stuff is getting affiliated more with Trump, people are dismissing it even more. And I try to explain to people, like with what I do, I don't disclose my political beliefs when it comes to the administration or anything. My goal is to really it's to try to influence the best political outcome or policy outcome possible. I don't really weigh in when it comes to politics or anything like. And the problem is like with the previous administration, I was in touch with some of the people there. I spoke with Harris's people at the DNC and just tried to have logical conversations about this stuff. And they were very, very, very dismissive. And it was this sort of thing where I'm like, the industry, I don't know what would have happened if there was another 4 years of trying to suppress it the way that things were happening under Biden. But I think what that has influenced is like a lot of my family members who I really respect, who are, kind of deeply ideologically driven when it comes to politics. They're just like, crypto is a Trump thing, it's a scam thing, it's a this, and it's just like now you're fighting all of these narrative things and all of this stuff. It impacts people's psychology. And the other side of it is that I think people just deep down want to believe that the government has everything under control. And
They don't.
Right. You guys said it. I didn't say it.
They don't.
No, well, we
The
got your
NSA
back. We
The
got your back.
the NSA created Bitcoin.
The six, right?
That's it.
Let me ask you this question. Go ahead. I'll answer.
No, nothing. Yeah, please.
I'm saying the fact that Bitcoin's almost been around for 20 years, almost 20 years, right?
Yep.
Don't you think it's really like, I think it's amazing that something's been around for almost 2 decades and people still think it's a scam.
Right. Yeah.
That right there to me just blows my mind. It's gonna be 20 years in 2027 or 28.
Yep. And this is still a very visceral thing to people because I say this as a joke. I posted this on Twitter once and it got a good reaction, but I'm like, if I'm on a date and I very quickly, if I'm not into it and I want to like end the date as soon as possible, I just tell them I write about Bitcoin for a living.
Yeah.
That shuts people up, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh God.
Yes.
Okay.
They think I'm a scammer, and like I purposely, and I even approach what I do, like I wear collared shirts on purpose. I talk about being a professor on purpose to try to bring some level of just like, guys,
Of course.
yeah, just like it's not even legitimacy, more like it's just a thing in the world, and you can keep putting your head in the sand and not paying attention to this, or you can learn how to embrace it. And I think, I don't know if you guys know who Cleve Messidor is.
No.
I've heard that name before somewhere.
Yeah, she's great too on the Democrat side of things. She was part of the Obama administration, and she does really good work advocating for crypto amongst Democrats who understand it. So she's solid. I think she's based in DC, but
Ro Khanna,
there's all
I follow Ro Khanna too.
Yeah, Ro Khanna's great as well. Ro is great. She said something quite profound. I interviewed her at the DNC, and I see where she's coming from. I think she said also the internet, the message that she said, especially to communities of color, she said like the internet was going to democratize everything, and everyone's going to win, and blah blah blah. And so like people have heard this before. They don't want to hear it again with crypto. So it's that, I think that's some of the struggle with what with what everyone is up against too. And I wouldn't just say that's like a communities of color thing. I think generally speaking, it's broader than that. Yes, 100%. Exactly. But the problem, please.
No, please.
I was gonna say the broader problem also is like I just got back after Kenya. I was in South Africa in a township there that runs completely on Bitcoin. That's what people get paid in. That's what they buy everything in. And the problem there too is when it comes to onboarding people, at some point somebody was involved in some sort of scam where someone said, "Give me some money, I'll buy some Bitcoin for you, I'll buy some crypto for you," and people don't know how to dissociate this idea of like you never actually had it in a wallet that you held the keys to, and that, because that whole idea, when you look at your Coinbase account or any of this sort of digital interfaces, it looks the same as a Fidelity brokerage or whatever else.
Exactly.
And so it's this idea of like, no, like, so it's explaining to people that like you have to hold these keys, and that's kind of the equivalent of like taking cash out of an ATM, or literally like, it's this new dimension of a digital space that's so hard for people to understand. But also, and please push back here if you feel the opposite, I think getting people to take responsibility for like custodying their own stuff
That's
is
the key.
very, very
So,
difficult.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
yes.
so Kim, yeah,
Yeah.
I think Kim wanted to say something.
I did. Funny, I was going to touch upon that. Going into the whole idea of self-custody and privacy. Like,
Yep.
and I know that there are some bills on, on in Washington, D.C. right now surrounding that. So what are your thoughts on the concept of privacy and self-custody in crypto? And what can people do to maybe encourage their Congress people and so forth to, support the concept? I believe in self-custody. I believe in privacy,
Yep.
but what do you feel that people can do to
So
cross that?
great question. So there's a few bills that people can support, and I will highlight them. So there's the Bitcoin Act, which will be going through, but that's bigger than just Bitcoin in that it enshrines into law the right for Americans to hold their private keys. So that's Lummis in the Senate, and that's a guy named Nick Begich who introduced it to the House. But there's a bigger, more important act than that called the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. This act makes it so that the law cannot say that open source developers are money transmitters, and it also protects your ability to use a non-custodial wallet without having to identify yourself.
Right.
So these are really, really important things. I don't know how much you're following. So there's the Tornado Cash situation,
Yes.
and then also this, and the Samurai situation. So I've been at the Southern District for the first 4 pretrial hearings for the Samurai case. And I literally, right before doing this, I just emailed the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Todd Blanche published a memo on April 7th called, I think people just refer to it as the Blanche memo, where he said the US government will no longer go after crypto mixers and things that help preserve privacy.
Yeah.
So, but I would say if there's anything, one takeaway, one call to action, if you're listening to this, you go to Save Our Wallets, our as in you and I, saveourwallets.org. You type in your zip code and it will give you all of your elected officials, and it will tell you how to contact them so that you can tell them that the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act is important to you. I think this is the number one piece of legislation that will protect wallets across the crypto space for everyone.
Yes,
Okay,
definitely.
great.
I'd just
Sure.
like to add, I think we agree with you. It's the responsibility part. And that's the huge part that we teach is to take responsibility for your own assets, right? One of the original tenets of this space is be your own bank. But
Yeah.
it's a certain that you don't realize it until you get into this space that teaching that everybody doesn't necessarily want the responsibility, so over the years when we've looked at it, it started to formulate like, wow, guys, mass adoption may look like banks coming into this space
Yes.
by selling and custodying people's crypto. They feel
100%.
comfortable with banks. They might put in place the FDIC, etc. So, it's just interesting how things have played out. But that is what adoption curves look like. So, what are your thoughts on that in terms of SAB 121? Being rescinded and now SAB 122 in place, the new game that's about to be played.
Yeah.
Decentralized.
Yeah, it's hard. I have this conversation a lot. It's hard so speaking for a second just to Bitcoin, the problem with Bitcoin is that the base layer will one day become too expensive for the average person to use.
Correct.
And so that's a real concern. So even now telling people to hold your private keys on the Bitcoin base layer, God only knows what a transaction on the base layer is going to cost 10 years from now, 15 years from now. There are upgrades that can be made to the base layer to make it more affordable. Maybe layer 2s will get built that make it better. And also I do look at what's happening on other blockchains and how, other blockchains, I would say on a scale of decentralization, which is a spectrum. Some are highly centralized, some are,
Right.
Bitcoin, I would say, is the most decentralized. I just pay attention to what that looks like and to what self-custody will look like in the long run in those places. But, to go back to Hal Finney, who communicated with Satoshi in 2009, the first person to run the Bitcoin software outside of Satoshi, even he was like, I don't know how we're going to do this without banks. And like, for example, like when Bukele came into power in El Salvador, there's a custodial wallet down there it was called the Bitcoin Beach wallet, but now it's called Blink.
Mm.
I use Blink from time to time. It's honestly like super, super convenient. It's a great onboarding tool. But it's not something where I would never tell someone to hold like a significant amount of money there. It's more like your pocket cash. I would never keep maybe more than $100 worth of Bitcoin on there or something. I don't have the answer is my long-winded response. It's like, I don't have the answer to this. But I also, what I love about this space is that because it's all open source technology across these blockchains, I don't have to have the answer because we have so many eyes and minds looking at this. What I'm just doing is paying attention to who comes up with the best answers and to try to,
Solution.
and that's it.
So-
And to look at trade-offs. Nothing is ever perfect. It's just sort of what feels best for you and how you want to engage with the technology.
I know you don't have
100%.
much time
I think
left
that goes to, I think all that, because you're talking about the wallet Blink or whatever,
Yep.
but that's a software wallet, correct? So that goes back to,
A
yes?
hot wallet, yes.
Yeah, it's a hot
software
wallet. It's a software wallet. So that goes back to the importance of having hard wallets to
Correct.
store your crypto.
Yep,
You
yep.
know? Yeah. Okay.
100%.
So I have-
That's a different thing, and people need to learn that.
They
And
do.
and props real quick. I'll come right back to you. Props to all of
Thank
you
you.
because I did the sort of education you're doing when I first started years ago. It's emotionally very tough to be in the position you're all in. It's a very, very, because what you're doing is you're essentially becoming a financial advisor, not just in terms of like telling people about the assets, value, fluctuations, all that, but teaching people this sort of thing because it doesn't end with you just saying, here's how a hardware wallet
No,
works. They're
no.
going to come back to you. They're going to ask questions. That's a very difficult role to play. So just
Yeah.
commending your efforts
Yeah.
there. I
Yeah.
apologize
It's
for
a
that.
fine
think
line. It's a very fine line.
I think what works to your point is that we realize that. And so because we have a group, a subscription group, it helps everyone to connect and we can teach each other simultaneously.
Nice. That's great.
So
Yep.
I know you don't have much time right now, so I have two short questions for you.
Sure.
Do you think the block size for Bitcoin should be increased? And secondly, what are your thoughts on stable coins and how would it affect Bitcoin?
Two good questions. Really good questions.
Right.
Block size increase. No, I think the block size should remain the way it is. I think Bitcoin Cash, if you want to use a different Bitcoin, that's it. I think Bitcoin succeeds if it scales properly, meaning most transactions will end up occurring on layer twos. So Lightning, there's a number of other layer twos coming out. I'll shout out some friends of mine. This is where it gets really interesting. Friend of mine, super, super brilliant guy named Willem Schro, just yesterday at launch. It's a layer two on Bitcoin called Botanics. What they did is they transported the EVM. So they brought Ethereum to Bitcoin.
And it's
Nice.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So now you could use Bitcoin with a protocol like Aave or a protocol or stable coins or something. It's very, very fascinating.
Nice.
And this is why I say I'm constantly paying attention to the broader technology,
Right.
not just the assets, because I think a lot of it is portable. It can go back and forth between different networks.
Okay.
But I think the block size, the most important thing about Bitcoin is that people can run a node if they want to. And if the block size got bigger, it would become much more expensive to run a node. So I think my own thing is like I prioritize security amongst everything else.
Correct.
Yeah. And
If
I
you're
think
gonna have money, if you're gonna be money, yeah.
it has to remain decentralized. And the only way for that to be the case is for people to run nodes. If that gets too expensive, it's not going to work. Stable coins, I could give you two answers on. I have an ideological answer or a philosophical answer and a practical answer. I'll start with the practical one. I think stablecoins are great. Yeah. So I lived in Venezuela during hyperinflation, and one of the things that everybody was trying to do was get dollars. So stablecoins make that easier for people. Amen. Doesn't need to great, fantastic. I don't care what rails they run on, whatever. It's great. The issue. So on a practical level, totally back it. I think we're now gonna see Tether running on Lightning, and you're gonna see Tether and other stablecoins running on Bitcoin layer twos as well. My thing is this, like I remember the 2008-9 crash. I know that Bitcoin came out of that, gave birth to this whole crypto industry.
Right.
The US government wants stablecoins right now because they want companies to sell treasuries too. I mean, yeah. So I look at it and
And they can also freeze it also, right?
Exactly. That's exactly
Yep.
right. They can be frozen. So my
Mhm.
thing is, I think that so on the philosophical level, the people that I've interviewed in the federal government would have my head, don't like when I say this, but Bitcoin does compete with the dollar, in my opinion, as money. That's
Mhm.
just my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it's deeply unfair to the poorest members
Right.
of society that
Agreed.
don't have a 401k,
Mhm.
that can't afford Bitcoin, that work for a wage in dollars,
Mhm.
and that money is constantly being diminished.
It's
And
decreased, yeah.
my bigger issue with this got me disinvited from a Michael Saylor party when I wrote this piece, but
Really? Oh, okay.
I wrote a piece called "Michael Saylor Doesn't Understand Bitcoin," which for Bitcoin Magazine,
Right.
because he's tried to make the argument that Bitcoin is not money, it's just collateral and it's just for companies and it's not. And I'm like, oh, I was
Mhm.
like, all right, like that's your opinion. And he talked about he had this grand plan for how like the U.S. will acquire all the Bitcoin and then we'll just ship stable coins to the rest of the world. And to
Mhm.
me, that's the same sort of mentality of like, we'll take all the good stuff and we'll ship the
Utopia.
garbage to like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't, there's a lot of people who say a lot of things I disagree with, and I have to bite my tongue sometimes because of the work that I do now. That was the line for me. I didn't know that was the line, but I learned it when I heard him say that.
Mhm.
Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin is for the world. Crypto technology is for the world. All of this is for the world. It's not for America. I'm
Mhm.
happy that America wants to embrace the technology. Great. That's
Uh-huh.
great. But
Mhm.
stop talking like I think it was Saylor who talked about Bitcoin as like manifest destiny for the United States. I can't hear that sort of shit. It just drives me fucking nuts. And it's
Yeah.
because the world, again, like for me, like just specifically talking about Bitcoin as money, what I believe, and this comes from having worked as a teacher, social worker, done all sorts of work with human beings, is that I understand that not everybody has the time, resources, ability to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, but
Correct.
something should exist for those who are trying with all of their heart to get out of a situation they're in. And having lived in Venezuela, I have friends in Lebanon, I have friends in Turkey,
Mm,
I have
Mm.
friends living through hyperinflation right
mhm,
now,
mhm,
and the idea of something, the idea that the lifeline for them is also the thing that BlackRock is trying to acquire as much as possible of, that the whole world is sort of synergistically aligning around this thing. I don't know how that all pans out. I
Mhm.
just know that even the people that I visited in South Africa, they've moved from the shacks that they were relegated to because of apartheid
mhm,
to
mhm,
proper houses because they've had Bitcoin for the last 7 or 8 years.
Mm.
I want that story to be a global phenomenon. I want people
mhm,
Exactly.
to feel
mhm,
and to not have any institutions tell people that they can't have access to that. That's my
Mhm.
main
Mhm.
motivation in working now
Mhm.
on a policy front. Everybody, not Bitcoin is for anyone. I won't say it's for everyone because if you don't want to use it, don't use it.
Mhm.
Crypto more broadly, it's for anyone, not everyone. Everyone who's trying to better themselves should have access to this thing, and that's the extent of my thesis.
Point
Whether
blank
they want to
period.
use it or not is up to them, but everyone should have access to it.
Point blank.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
agree.
you. Thank you.
We agree with all of that you said. We align so much because the reality is that stable coin is attached to the regular traditional finance
System.
world.
Yeah.
If the bond market goes crazy, if the Dixie tanks, guess what's going to happen to that same stable coin? So you're in the
Totally.
same boat,
Mhm.
so that's the conundrum I think we're in, that hopefully the work that you do, hopefully you can start to get across to some of the people up in the political sphere to understand. But we appreciate your time. We know
My pleasure.
time's limited. Hopefully we can have you back at some point.
Yeah, I'm happy to join. Yeah, and
We would,
hopefully I'll see you guys around at events
yeah.
in the city and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yes, we have an
Yeah.
event we're going to invite you. But before we leave, one
Yep.
thing, what is the last thing you want to echo to the world before you
Yeah.
leave this chat?
Yeah. It's a great question. I'll I'll reiterate before I say something else. I'll reiterate that this technology is for everyone. It's not for America to win. It's for everyone. It's for the whole world. Something that I learned, and this idea of Bitcoin as money that over time accrues value, that value accrues to it. What most people don't understand is that the world is being repriced right now. It's getting repriced in Bitcoin. And one of the easier ways to actually measure Bitcoin is not necessarily pricing it against the old system, which is dollars. It's pricing it against another scarce asset like a house. So over time, it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to buy property in Bitcoin. And I just want people to understand that whether or not governments like that, whether they're into that idea, whether they're not into the idea, the world is being repriced. You can ignore that to your own. I'm going to be careful choosing this because I hate terms like have fun staying poor. I hate these sorts of things that I just can't stand it. But like, it's a reality that we're living through.
Yes.
And you can ignore it, I think, I would say to your own disadvantage to be as polite as possible. I'm not saying it all works, and I'm not saying that there isn't certain issues with Bitcoin, broader crypto technology, crypto assets. That's not my point. It's just that there is something happening. And if I could give any words of advice, it's like not only Bitcoin, but like some of the decentralized, like social media, like Nostr, the decentralized AI that's coming, lean into it. Don't shy away from it. I think I know it's uncomfortable. I'm not a technical person. I love human beings. There's still days that there's a social work clinic across the street from me, and I get sad. I'm like, oh, I just wish I were counseling people. Like, I wish that I was still doing this work because I really enjoyed that work. But I feel that what's happening, what we're discussing here, because of the time we're living through, it's more important that the world more largely understands what's happening. Because ideally, I mean, I taught immigrants for 12 years. You guys know it. Immigrants in New York, hustlers. I mean, hustlers. Ideally, it's like our time is diminished by dollars being printed. Ideally, people get to use this technology to preserve their life force, literally to preserve their life force, to have more time with their family, their friends, their community, to have more time to, one of the best things I heard, and I know I tend to rant about stuff, but so many people have told me beautiful things. I covered, there's now 14 different circular Bitcoin economies in Peru. So these are people who never had bank accounts. From the Andes to the Amazon, there are people in Peru now using this. The best way I ever heard it put was that it's giving these people their culture back, because the traditional system was stripping them of their culture. They now have their time back. They have control of their time. They have savings. They're thinking about their children's future again versus living day to day in survival mode. So if we can take people out of survival mode and give them their life force back, that's ultimately what I'm here for.
That's beautiful.
Amen.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Once again,
Thank you.
Frank
Thank you so
Carver.
much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very
Yes,
much,
thank
brother.
you. We got a t-shirt for you. Bitcoin,
All
give
right,
your life
appreciate
force back. Bitcoin, give your life force back.
That's it.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you for the work you're doing,
You
and
too.
please make sure to
Thank
take care of
you.
yourselves as you do this work. It's tough
You
work,
too.
and you're doing great stuff. So thank
You
you.
too.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Frank.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.